Good day, everyone. Today, our topic is about implementing a curriculum in the daily classroom. Okay. DepEd Order number 70, Series 2012. Teachers of all public elementary and secondary schools will not be required to prepare detailed lesson plan. However, teachers with less than 2 years of teaching experience shall be required to prepare daily lesson plan which shall include the following: the objectives, subject matter, procedure, assessment, and the assignment. When we say objectives, it is the outline specific learning outcomes that students are expected to achieve during the lesson. They should be clear, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely bound. Specific pa pala. Subject matter, what you'll teach in the lesson. The procedure is how you'll teach it step by step. Assessment, how you'll check if students learned, or um, you will measure what they learned. Assignment, practice task to help students remember the lesson. And then next, starting the class right, laying down the curriculum plan, objectives or intended learning outcomes, desired learning that will focus of the lesson. Learning outcomes are based on taxonomy of objectives present to us as cognitive, affective, and psychomotor. Bloom's taxonomy has been revised by his own student Lauren Anderson and David Cartwell. Let us study both the comparison to the next slide. Okay. Bloom's Taxonomy 1956. Start with knowledge to evaluation, and the revised Bloom's by Anderson 2001 was started remembering and to creating. The Bloom's Taxonomy 1956 is cognitive domain, refers mental skill, processes information in learning. While the other one, it focuses to the cognitive domain, also aims to be more practical and applicable to real-world learning. The levels in the old Bloom's taxonomy, it has 6 levels arranged in a hierarchical hierarchical order from the simplest to the most complex. And the other one is it has also 6 levels, and but that terminology or and order have been slightly changed to be more action oriented and reflected in contemporary education goals. Let's start in Bloom's taxonomy. Knowledge is to remember basic facts and information. Comprehension, understanding the meaning of information. The application is using knowledge in new situations. Analysis, breaking down information into parts. Application, I mean, yeah, analysis, synthesis ko pala. Combining information to create something new, and evaluation, judging the value of the info. In Revised Blooms by Anderson, first is the remembering. Remembering, recalling facts and basic information. Understanding, to explain concepts and ideas. The applying, this is using knowledge in practical situations. Analyzing, breaking down information into its components. Evaluating, judging the value of the information, and creating, producing something new or original. Uses action-oriented verbs, making the levels more understandable and relatable to students. That is the Revised Blooms by Anderson. Okay, next. The cognitive categories with the example keywords, verbs, for each in the new version of Bloom's taxonomy that follows. Here, the categories started remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. There are the example keywords as you can see in the PowerPoint. When we say remembering, this is to recall or retrieve previous learned information. For example, in science, there is something photosynthesis that will be tackled there. Define the term photosynthesis and list its key steps. Second, understanding, comprehending meaning, translation, stating meaning in own words, making inferences. For example, is explain the process of still photosynthesis in your own words using an analogy to help illustrate the concept. There's also the applying. Using concept in a new situation applies what have been learned in new situation. Example, calculate the amount of carbon dioxide produced during photosynthesis if a plant absorbs 10 grams of water. Analyzing is separating material or concepts into components parts so that the organization is clear. This is to compare and contrast the process of photosynthesis, that is the example of analyzing, and evaluating, making judgments about value of ideas or materials. For example, critically evaluate the effectiveness of different methods for measuring the rate of photosynthesis. You must justify your reasons. Creating is building a structure or pattern from various elements, this to create a whole or new concept. Yeah. Example, design an experiment to test the effective of light intensity of the rate of photosynthesis, outlining the steps of material needed. And that's all. And in writing objectives or intended learning outcomes, it is recommended to focus more on developing higher order thinking skills and less of lower level thinking skills. It suggests that as students progress through higher levels of learning, they will naturally develop lower level thinking skills. As you can see in the pyramid, there is the lower order thinking skills and the higher order thinking skills. Understanding and remembering, that is the lower order thinking skills according to my research, and applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating, that is the higher order thinking skills. Let's see. In here, there is doing at the top, creating, which involves actively participating in learning, such as asking questions and engaging. Between creating and evaluating, there's the so-called active. If you will open your module, you will encounter these words. It's the same definitions that I gave earlier about doing. And evaluating, here there's a receiving and participations. Actively participating in the learning process, and the visual receiving, which in the analyzing and applying, which is receiving information visually, such as pictures, diagrams, videos, and sometimes using slides. Next, passive is between applying and understanding, such as listening to lectures or reading a textbook. And then the verbal receiving, which is in between understanding and remembering. That is receiving an information verbally, such as through lectures or conversations. And you will encounter more about the levels of knowledge from my group mates. Okay.
Now we move on to the levels of knowledge. Another revision is the expansion of the concept of knowledge, which was not given emphasis nor discussed thoroughly before. Here are the levels of knowledge. First, here is the factual knowledge. For example, the factual knowledge are the ideas, specific data, or informations. For example, a learner that only knows what is a school. In this level, this is commonly seen in the preschoolers or preschoolers from kinder to grade 1 or grade 2. They only tend to know what is an object, but they still do not know the deeper meaning of each object or the use of each object. For the second level, the conceptual knowledge, it is the words or ideas known by common name, common features, multiple specific examples which may either be concrete or abstract. These are the concepts, or the concepts are facts that interrelate with each other to function together. For example, a learner that knows what is a heart. He knows what is a heart. He also knows what are the functions of the heart and what does it do to the body. We usually notice these levels of or this level of knowledge in the learners of grades 4, grades 5, and grade 6. Sometimes we can see this in the grade 7 learners. Next one is the procedural knowledge. This level talks about how things work or a step-by-step action or methods of inquiry. For example, a learner that knows about a heart, its functions, and what does it do to the body, plus he knows how does the heart functions, the step-by-step procedures of the heart pumping blood, and we usually see these levels of knowledge in the secondary students where they tend to know the reality of life or the real world, or they are now experiencing the real world experience. For the next level, the metacognitive knowledge, this knowledge of cognition in general, or awareness of knowledge of one's own condition. This is the level of thinking about thinking. For example, there are formulas for example, the formulas in mathematics. There are standard formulas in mathematics, right? When a learner is in this level of knowledge, the learner can now produce new formulas from these standards formulas to solve the problem being asked. He can now come up with he can now strategize other things or other formulas in order for him to solve the problem that is being asked. Meaning, this learner can now adjust and adapt in any kind of situation. And the intended learning outcomes should be written in SMART. SMART meaning S for specific, M for measurable, A for attainable, and R for result oriented, or what we call the outcomes based, and T for the time bound. Here are the two um, intended learning outcomes. First is the subject matter. The subject matters or the content comes from a body of knowledge that will be learned through the guidance of the teacher. It is the what in the teaching, or it is the content, or it is the lesson that is being taught to the learners or the students. The next one is the procedure. It is how the teacher implements the curriculum. It also covers the adjustment of strategies of the teacher in order for this teacher or for him or her to make her students participate and easily grasp or understand the lessons. It is where also the teacher adjust or adapt or change strategies to which or uh, to deliver or to let the learners participate with the discussion, or for her learners to easily understand what is being taught. There are also many ways of teaching for the different kind of learners. Let's take a look on the ways a teacher arranges teaching learning situations that will make the students engage in learning. According to Corpus and Sandalanan in 2013, they enumerated some approaches and methods which may be useful for the different kind of learners. First one here is the directed demonstration methods. These directed demonstration methods are project-based. For example, first, a teacher in English demonstrates how to compose a paragraph for his or her learner to come up or to compose a paragraph. He first he first teach the step-by-step composition of a paragraph before asking the learners to compose one. Next one is the cooperative learning approaches. Example of this approach is that a teacher pair a slow learning student to a fast learner student. And sometimes children tends to understand easily the explanation of a peer rather than from the teacher, because of course the peer can or the learner can say that, oh, this is my classmate, so if he can, why can't I? There. So this is the think, pair, and share approach. Next one is the deductive or the inductive approach. Approaches for deductive approach, it is where, for example, a teacher may explain the process of photosynthesis, then showing examples of how it works in plants. And for the inductive approach, for example, a teacher may let the students observe a plant's growth under different conditions for them to learn about photosynthesis. In this inductive approach, there is an additional conditions to be learned by the students. And some other approaches, such as blended learning, for example, having face-to-face classes, then somehow there is maybe a typhoon or anything that a teacher cannot do face-to-face classes. So this teacher may use online classes for them to continue their lessons. Another approach is reflective learning. It is also where a teacher gives a title of a movie, then or gives the learners some title of movies to be watched by them, then ask the students to reflect through a particular area in that movie. There are also many classifications of learning styles according to different authors. The multiple intelligence theory of Howard Gardner implies several learning styles. Here are the three preferred learning styles that help teachers choose the methods and the materials they use. These three preferred learning styles, or the three preferred styles, can help teacher choose the methods and materials they use. First one here is the visual. Here is and the common characteristic of visuals are the use of graphs, charts, pictures, and because learners, especially children, tends to remember things that are shown in pictures, graphs, and other visual aids rather than just the teacher just talk and talk and talk. And here are some tips for teachers about the learners. Um, Turns notes into pictures. A teacher may turn the, instead of giving notes, a teacher may use pictures, diagrams, maps to imply the lesson. Next one is the auditory. Um, Recalls information through hearing and speaking. In this area, I have somehow noticed through my child that he prefers to be told how to do things rather than reading the instructions or the procedures before he do it. And here are some tips for teachers about learners. A teacher may record lectures and listen, and the learners will listen to this. Or the teacher may repeat or may read aloud a story for the learners. Another one here is the kinesthetic. I know you have noticed that some children prefers hands-on activities. Not just children, but also us, the adults, may sometimes prefer hands-on activities such as cooking rather than or we do the cooking rather than reading or writing the procedures, but we tend to prefer cooking than reading it. Or in a computer, for example, in a computer, we usually sometimes tend to easily apply or easily apply or do the step by step, or when we were still learning computers, right? We usually want to, or we usually prefer to do the hands-on rather than learning or reading the word by word explanation of the computer system. Activities also that are part of application rather than sitting down and listening only to the teacher.
Now let's continue. The teaching and learning must be supported by instructional materials or IM. So these instructional materials are important tools that helps in the learning process. They include things like books, videos, charts, and hands-on activities because students has different learning styles. So it is important to consider the teaching methodologies or strategies that will be used, as this will ensure the individual differences will be catered. So instructional materials should complement visual, auditory, and tactile, or a combination of the three. However,
Following Dale's cone of learning, which is a visual model that represents the effectiveness of different learning methods based on their level of active participation. It suggests that the more actively involved senses in the learning process, the greater the retention of the information. However, it doesn't mean that the experiential learning is the only effective that educators should use in teaching. Instead, each stages can be combined as they are interrelated in order to cater the needs of each student. And this can help teachers to make decisions on what resources and materials will be maximized in learning. So next is the cone of experience. This cone of experience is the first introduced in Dale's 1946 book, Audiovisual Methods in Teaching. This is composed of 11 stages starting from concrete experience at the base of the cone, then it becomes more abstract as it reaches the peak of the cone. So, what instructional support materials will the teachers use according to the learning styles and the outcomes to be achieved? So, here are some guidelines. So, let's start at the base of the cone. So first is the direct purposeful experience. So true learning by doing retains almost all of the learning outcomes. So after 2 weeks, students tend to remember 90% of what they say and do. So this level emphasizes hands-on learning, where learners directly engage with the material through activities such as dramatic presentation, real experiences like field trip, community immersion, and practice teaching. So the direct experience and active participation in these activities leads to a deep understanding and lasting retention. Next is after 2 weeks, students tend to remember 70%. This level involves activities that encourage learner interaction and participation, such as small group discussions, individual reporting, role playing, and panel discussions. So, in addition, talking and writing about the material helps learners process and absorb the information, leading to a higher retention rate, and that is 70%. So, this is more on receiving and participating. In the third level, students are passive observers, where they do activities such as watching movies, viewing exhibits, and watching demonstrations. So they only see and hear. While these activities can be informative, the lack of active engagement leads to a lower level of retention, and that is 50%. In the fourth level, focuses on the visual learning, such as looking at pictures, paintings, illustrations, and drawings. Visual aids can be effective in conveying information, but the lack of active engagement and interaction limits retention, and students can only remember 30%. Then, at the fifth level, um, after 2 weeks, students tend to remember 20%. This level involves listening to information through lectures, sermons, and monologues. While auditory learning can be effective for some, the passive nature of simply listening results in a lower retention rate, and that is 20%. Then, lastly, is reading. Has only 10% retention, and this is the lowest level of retention as it involves the passive act of reading. While reading can be an important part of the learning process, it requires also some active engagement and processing to ensure meaningful understanding and retention. So regardless of the amount of remembering from concrete to abstract, each layer contributes to learning and requires instruction, support, materials, and these are the following. So number one is visual. This includes pictures, charts, diagrams, maps, posters, and others. And it could also be abstract. These are verbal symbols and written words. Another is audio. Examples are recordings of sounds like music. It could be natural or artificial sounds. Next is audio visual. These, these are combination of what can be seen and heard, and one example is a video presentation. Another is kinesthetic. This involves hands-on activities that encourage physical movement and interaction with objects. So it includes manipulative materials like modeling clay, rings, dumbbells, equipments, and others. So lastly, experiential. This utilizes all the modalities. This is the most comprehensive approach to learning, incorporating visual, auditory, kinesthetics, and often even emotional aspects. So, examples are field trips. These are experiencing real world situations. Another is project-based learning, applying knowledge to solve real world problems, and community engagement. So why is it important to consider different learning modalities? Because of the individual differences of students. They have different learning preferences and strengths. So some learn best visually, while others are more auditory or kinesthetic learners. So here are the basic component of lesson plan. A lesson plan has objectives, intended learning outcomes, subject matter. Under subject matter, there should be the topic, references, concepts, and materials. Another is the procedure. Under procedure, there are the preparatory activity, lesson proper, and under lesson proper, the motivation, activities, discussion, conceptualization, and application. So, and of course, the assessment, learning or assessment of learning outcomes, wherein the students are going to answer the activity, then of course the assignment. So finding out what has been achieved, or at the end of the lesson plan, or I mean at the end of um, the activity, the teachers will now assess, or will now find out if the intended learning outcomes have been converted into achieved learning outcomes. So Here, the teacher will now assess if if the intended learning outcomes was achieved in order to see if it needs improvement or maybe further discussion. Then, tests and other tools are utilized at the end of the lesson to identify this. What knowledge, process, understanding, and performance are demonstrated by the learners. So, did the learners change their behavior? Like that. So, basing on the evaluation findings, teachers can adjust their teaching methods, materials, and activities to better support student learning. So, the rule of thumb, what has been taught should be measured to find out if the intended outcome set at the beginning has been achieved. So, more detailed outcomes or more detailed discussions will be found in the module of evaluation of the curriculum. So that's all, and thank you for listening.